Palestinians in Gaza may have 4 extra hours to stock up on food and search for missing family members. An Israeli cabinet minister says a 12-hour truce that started earlier today has been extended. Some people rushed out to markets while others pulled bodies from the remains of buildings. The Palestinian Health Ministry says the number of dead is now over 1,000. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is in Paris meeting with officials from Europe, Qatar, and Turkey. He's hoping to turn the truce into a full ceasefire. Well, for more on the situation in Gaza, we spoke to Khaled Elgindy. He's a fellow with the Center of Middle East Policy at the Brookings Institute and served as an advisor to the Palestinian leadership from 2004 to 2009. He says Israel's increasing use of force has strengthened Hamas's support among Palestinians. Have a listen.
Before this conflict, Hamas was essentially on the ropes. Its finances had been cut off. Its supply lines for rearming itself had been cut on the Egyptian side, thanks to the closure of most of the network of tunnels. It was so weakened, in fact, that it had to give in to terms for reconciliation with the Palestinian Authority that it had previously rejected. Since the conflict, it has become much more popular in Palestinian society because it is seen as standing up to Israeli occupation, standing up to Israeli brutality, and actually inflicting some damage, although I think even Palestinians realize that Hamas will not defeat Israel on the battlefield, but it is inflicting much more damage than even Israelis had expected.
Do you think at any point it would be possible for Israel and Hamas to find some kind of common ground and reach some kind of truce?
Well, it's not so much about Israel and Hamas finding common ground. It's about Israel and the Palestinians as a whole, including Hamas, finding some way to move forward essentially on a way to partition historic Palestine into 2 states, one for Israel and one for the Palestinians. That is the project that the United States has been trying to pursue, but has repeatedly failed, largely because Israeli and American policymakers think that it's possible to make peace with one set of Palestinians in the West Bank while making war against another set of Palestinians. And somehow all of this falls under the same peace process. The reality is there is one conflict between Israelis and Palestinians. Hamas is a manifestation of that. The rocket fire from Gaza is a result of the blockade by Israel on Gaza's borders. And unless those issues are resolved, one thing it's important to bear in mind that right now the demands that Hamas has made for lifting the siege on Gaza, for example, have been adopted by the entire Palestinian leadership of the PLO, which is the umbrella group that represents all Palestinians. So these aren't simply Hamas demands; these are Palestinian demands.
Khaled, given all of that, what do you think is the most effective way to negotiate a full ceasefire here?
Well, obviously the Egyptians have to play a role. I think it's time that the various stakeholders, the Egyptians, the Israelis, the Americans in particular, have a key role to play. But one of the mistakes that they've made is to deal with Hamas on a military basis in terms of negotiating ceasefires, but refuse to deal with it on a political basis. And so I think what has to come out of this, in addition to the fact that there has to be an end to the blockade in Gaza, I think the mere fact that Gaza will have to reconstruct the massive devastation and destruction that was inflicted by Israel over the last 3 weeks will mean that Gaza's borders have to be opened and normalized. But what's essential is to come to terms with reality. Hamas is a political force and not just a military force. It is part of the Palestinian body politic, whether we like it or not. In the same way that you have extremists inside the Israeli government, who don't accept the Palestinian state or want to make peace with Palestinians, they're a reality, and we can't simply pretend that they don't exist. And we deal with the reality that we have and not the one that we wish we had. So we have to come to terms with political realities.
That is Khaled Elgindy, a fellow with the Center for Middle East Policy at the Brookings Institution. He was speaking to us from Arlington, Virginia.